Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today it's a big one. We got the newest project from Linkin Park From Zero. It's hard not to be a bit cynical about a new project from Linkin Park, to the point where in retrospect you could argue they should have never been revived under that name, especially when the band could have made another band under a different name with the same roster, and they probably would have gotten a better response, at least among critics. But they wouldn't have been Linkin Park, now would they? They would have missed that massive revenue that comes with a revival tour, damn all the controversy at the door, I guess. Along with a project now that is their shortest to date and has seen some success, and, well look, there are comeback records in rock music where a new singer brings a different energy and intensity, and while it will never match the band at their best, at least you can hear the potential. There might be new promise in the line. My go-to is Black Gives Way to Blue by Alice in Chains, an album that is way better than it has any right to be. So with Linkin Park, I was skeptical, but overall open to this being good. Yet From Zero feels like a tour advertisement that, yeah, Emily Armstrong can totally pull off Linkin Park's catalog. Please spend an exorbitant amount on tickets in order to hear all the greatest hits. And you know what? If your nostalgia tells you that's enough to buy a ticket to that tour, I would get it. But it doesn't justify mediocre at best compositions, productions, and performances that are shockingly forgettable for a band that is known for their earworms, for better or for worse. And let me make this clear. While I think the way Linkin Park has handled all the drama around Emily Armstrong's past is questionable, especially when we get into content and themes of this album, as a singer, as a performer, I don't think she's the problem here. I mean, she's stuck with the impossible task of trying to fill Chester Bennington's shoes, try to bring some modern, new energy to Linkin Park. And there are fragments of more melodic, pop-adjacent singing on Over Each Other and Overflow and Stained that would not be out of place in rock radio in the late 2010s as she tries to fight through the occasional overcompressed whooshing filter. But she's also stuck in contrast to Mike Shinoda, who has not evolved as a rapper or singer in 20 goddamn years. And that would not normally be a huge issue. Linkin Park fans who listen to more rap, they tend to ignore that Mike Shinoda's, let's call it, limited in front of a mic, or hear how his verses on Cut the Bridge sound like something Lin-Manuel Miranda would have delivered with more intensity, or those attempts at triplet bars on Overflow that sound like he's perpetually surprised. He's only a little bit better on Good Things Go. Except it serves to highlight a band that has tried to be forward-thinking with their first album now in 7 years. They're firmly in strip mine past sounds for nostalgia purposes territory, and it really highlights how dated From Zero sounds. And again, that would not normally be an issue. Mainstream rock radio loves their acts that barely change the sound over the course of decades, especially if the formula is good, except for two factors. Number one, Linkin Park was a band that always consistently tried to be looking forward, for better or for worse, and two, the more you remind the audience of previous classic records, the more it forces the comparison to that past. And it raises the question of why we're even listening to this. Or worse still, raises questions on how previous Linkin Park albums have aged. In some cases, it's not good. But you know what? Maybe that's unfair. Casualty and Two-Faced are trying to bring in some faster, heavier riffs with a bit more of a polished snarl. The latter, the most flagrant hybrid theory riff I've heard in a while. Okay, so honest question. Why double down on that when your mix can't approach the heaviest in this genre, especially given how gauzy and over-processed the percussion is, when the more tuneful hooks were always Linkin Park's greatest underrated strength and led to more crossover, which you would think you would want for this sort of cash grab, album? I mean, it's a bad sign that Heavy is the Crown was included despite already being tied to Arcane, probably because it's one of the best hooks on the album, and that is not saying much. What happened to all the synthesizers, all the atmospherics? But then we get to the content and themes. And look, I said on Billboard Breakdown when the song dropped how it was a bad sign how defensive the Emptiness Machine sounded, because it sets up a self-referential thematic arc where the band's revival and return to success is basically a self-fulfilling prophecy, made all the worse given some of the controversy around said revival. And the reality is that Linkin Park have never been great lyricists, even on the albums I love. Well, I would say the rest of the album keeps keeps going to that territory, from cut the bridge about letting toxic people burn themselves out of your life when you're already on the edge, to the aggro retaliation of Casualty or the internal turmoil of Two-Faced. But honestly, I kind of would have preferred that thematic consistency to bog standard bad relationship gunk like Over Each Other and the miserable 1-2 punch of Stained and I Gave You Everything I Have that literally recycle the central forgotten forgiven conceit and lyrical ideas, or the utterly basic attempts at post-apocalyptic drudgery. And yes, it's absolutely nitpicking, but I legit hate every bit of studio banter left on this album. I don't want to hear Mike Shinoda tell anyone, let alone a woman, to get their screamy pants on. The band is nowhere near close to being loose or fun enough to include that without killing your atmosphere. But overall, From Zero is the sort of bad album that just depresses me. Every album ultimately exists to sell tickets for a tour, but it's rare that it feels so transparent and mercenary, because if Fort Minor got anything close to the same crowd as Linkin Park will on the billing, this album wouldn't exist. Not a single song here comes close to Linkin Park at their best. It's largely underpowered and underwritten, backed up by a self-referential victim complex that feels tasteless as hell, written from the top of the nostalgia industry that wants to have its misery cake and eat it too. I mean, at least on Hybrid Theory, when Linkin Park could be flat out embarrassing, or on some of the genre projects and experiments where they didn't really connect, the earnest effort and the craftsmanship to at least try gave them the benefit of the doubt. They do not get that here. I feel somewhat bad for Emily Armstrong, honestly, because if this gets backlash, it's largely gonna fall on her, but the reality is that Mike Shinoda is the one who deserves it way more. He is the reason this album is outright bad, rather than having an absence of good. No, it's not the worst project I've heard this year, but it's certainly the worst Linkin Park album I've heard. Yes, it's worse than One More Light, and it's easily the most disposable and cynical. In other words, skip it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I imagine there's going to be a lot of people who are real mad at me being pretty angry with this album, but you know what? As a Linkin Park fan, the guy who actually defends Meteora, even parts of Hands Held High and A Thousand Suns, the fact that this album is as cynical and disposable and overall middling of quality as it is when it tries to be self-referential in order to defend its middle-of-the-road quality, I'm sorry, I don't care about your nostalgia. If anything, it casts into light how much some of those albums you're nostalgic for haven't held up so well. Go back to Hybrid Theory, it's aged poorly. Overall, again, I'm sorry if that makes you upset. I'm sorry a lot of people do not like it when you're confronting the angst and problems with their nostalgia. But guess what? I was pretty harsh when it came around on Katy Perry and talking about that. Linkin Park deserves some of the exact same damn treatment. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you all want to get involved and help and support the channel, though after what I just said, I can't imagine why you would, but hey, the links to the memberships are down over there. Patreon's also an option as well, where you get options to get projects on my schedule or yell at me on my Discord. Make sure to have fun with that. Again, don't feel obligated. Tough times, I understand, but options available. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. I'll see you next time.